scent of pine and damp earth clung to Silas's clothes. As he emerged from the narrow canyon, the setting sun cast in long shadows across the desert floor. Deputy Hayes, leaning heavily on him, coughed, a fresh bloom of crimson staining the bandages wrapped around his arm. "She's still there," Hayes rasped, his voice strained with anxiety. "Barlow, he's that my sister." Silas's hand instinctively rested on the worn grip of his cold peacemaker. Barlow, the name tasted like ash in his mouth. He's been a thorn in Copper Canyon's side for far too long, a phantom flitting between fortunes and failures, always just beyond the reach of the law. Now, he's escalated from petty theft to kidnapping. "How far?" Silas asked, guiding Hayes toward a cluster of boulders for cover. "Not far," Hayes wheezed. "Into the caves. He's got a whole network carved out of the rock. It's bad in there, Silas." "Something's wrong." Silas felt the prickle of unease. Hayes wasn't prone to flights of fancy. "One how?" Hayes swallowed hard. "The air's thick. Smells like rot. And I heard chanting." "Chanting?" Silas felt a shiver trace its way down his spine. He's faced hardened criminals, ruthless killers, but this felt different. This felt tainted. He's heard whispers of Barlow dabbling in dark arts, but he's always dismissed them as tall tales. Now, he wasn't so sure. They reached the mouth of the cave entrance. The darkness that spilled from the opening seemed to absorb the last vestiges of daylight, and a palpable sense of dread permeated the air. Silas could hear the faint echo of chanting now, a rhythmic drum that seemed to vibrate in his bones. "Stay here," Silas instructed Hayes, his voice low and firm. "Cover me if I don't return." Hayes nodded, his face pale with fear. Silas drew his Colt and stepped into the darkness. The cave twisted and turned, a labyrinth of damp rock and echoing chambers. The chanting grew louder, accompanied by the flickering light of torches that cast grotesque shadows on the walls. Finally, he reached a large cavern. In the center of the cavern, Barlow stood before a crude altar fashioned from stacked stones. He wore a dark cloak, and his face was contorted in a manic grin. He was surrounded by two hulking men, Bart and Finn, Barlow's usual muscle, who stood like statues, their faces blank and devoid of emotion. And tied to the altar, her eyes white with terror, was Mary Hayes. Barlow raised his hands, chanting in a language Silas didn't recognize. He seemed to be drawing power from something dark and unsettling. "Barlow!" Silas roared, his voice echoing through the cavern. Barlow stopped chanting and turned to face him, his eyes gleaming with a feverish light. "Silas," he hissed, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "Just in time for the ceremony." "Let her go," Silas demanded, his Colt trained on Barlow. "You think you can stop me?" Barlow laughed, a hollow, unsettling sound. "This isn't about money anymore, Silas. This is about something greater. What's that supposed to mean?" "I'm a conduit," Barlow said, his voice taking on a detached, almost hypnotic quality. "A vessel. The old powers are returning. The land remembers." Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. An Apache shaman, his face painted with intricate patterns, his eyes filled with an ancient wisdom. He moved with a fluid grace, a silent predator. Nahka. Silas had encountered him before, a fleeting glimpse of a man who seemed to exist between worlds. "He speaks lies," Nahka said, his voice a low rumble. "The spirits are not pleased. This land suffers." "You interfere," Barlow snarled, turning his attention to Nahka. "You don't understand the power I wield." Nahka didn't respond, simply raised a hand, and a wave of energy pulsed outward, throwing Bart and Finn to the ground. They landed with a thud, groaning in pain. Silas saw his opportunity. He stepped forward slowly, deliberately, keeping his Colt trained on Barlow. "Let her go, Barlow. This ends now." Barlow lunged forward, attempting to knock Silas off balance, but Silas was ready. He sidestepped the attack, and Barlow stumbled, momentarily exposing himself. Silas didn't hesitate. He fired. The bullet struck Barlow in the shoulder, sending him sprawling. He clutched his arm, his face contorted with pain and rage. Nahka moved swiftly, severing the ropes that bound Mary Hayes. She scrambled to her feet, her eyes filled with relief and gratitude. "Go," Nahka said to Mary, his voice gentle. "Go and be safe." Mary didn't argue. She turned and fled the cavern, disappearing into the darkness. Barlow, still clutching his injured arm, let out a frustrated roar. "You haven't won," he snarled at Silas. "This isn't over. There are others like me." Silas ignored the threat, focusing on Nahka. Who were these others? Nahka looked at Silas, his eyes filled with a sorrow that seemed to span centuries. "They are shadows," he said, "the echoes of a forgotten age. They feed on the suffering of this land." He turned and walked toward the back of the cavern, disappearing into the shadows. Silas watched him go, a sense of unease settling over him. He knew that Barlow's words, that there were others, were not empty threats. He's felt it, a subtle shift in the balance of things, a growing darkness that threatened to engulf Copper Canyon. He walked to the mouth of the cave, stepping back into the fading light. Hayes was waiting for him, his face etched with worry. "He's contained," Silas said, his voice weary. "But this is just the beginning." Hayes looked at him, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "What do you mean?" Silas looked back at the dark opening of the cave. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "But I have a feeling we're about to find out." The distant mountains loomed over Copper Canyon, casting a long, ominous shadow over the land. Something was stirring in those mountains, something ancient and powerful, and Silas knew that he and the people of Copper Canyon were about to face a challenge unlike any they had ever known.